Welcome to show number 210 of the Arc Junkies Podcast. Today, I'm chatting with Weston Spencer of Salt City Steel out of Salt Lake City, Utah. Weston is a full-time lead mechanic and welder, a small business owner, and a tool inventor. He does quite a bit of ornamental work and has developed an awesome tool called the Picket Master Pro that I've brought up on the show several times. It's an awesome tool, and I wanted to talk with him to hear a little bit more about it. We'll get right into it after a quick word from the supporters of the show. Today's episode of the Arc Junkies Podcast is brought to you by Everlast Welders. Whether you're new to welding or you're a seasoned pro, Everlast has the perfect machine for your skill level and budget. Whether you need to be able to stick, MIG, or TIG, or even plasma cut, Everlast has you covered. Or maybe you're looking for a multi-process machine to do a little bit of everything. That's fine, they have that too. Now's a great time to pick up an Everlast machine to start that side hustle or small business in your garage or home shop. I personally use Everlast myself, and that's why I recommend it. I'm currently running the 255 EXT for all my TIG jobs, and my Cyclone 200E for all my MIG jobs. Both machines have performed great. My favorite part about these machines is the 5-year warranty. Where else can you get a machine at this price point with this performance and that type of warranty? And right now, if you buy any machine that comes with a stock foot pedal, you can use code word ARCJunkies in the comment section at checkout and get a free Nova foot pedal and TIG torch upgrade. It's a $100 value. Everlast Welders. Weld mean, weld green. We're also brought to you by my good friends at Rockmount Research and Alloys. They make rods and wires to tackle your biggest welding challenges. Rockmount makes rods and wires designed to weld stronger and last longer. Whether you're a maintenance welder by trade, a mechanic that knows his way around a welding machine, a job shop, or you're just a mobile welder doing side work, Rockmount has the electrodes to help you get the job done right the first time, every time. Let's say you need to weld up some parts on a front end loader that keep breaking. Try out the Brutus electrode and get higher tensile strength with more elongation compared to 7018 or 70S6. You can also use this rod to help weld identifiable dissimilar metals such as nickel, tool steel, stainless, manganese, and cast. Or maybe you need to do a little bit of buildup on some parts that have worn down due to abrasion. Check out the Apollo A electrode. This electrode's been developed to produce the most crack-resistant welds on heavy equipment. The Apollo A is superior for metal-to-metal wear applications. You can find out more information on these products and more by checking out rockmountwelding.com. And don't forget, you can get Rockmount rods and wires right through MSC Direct and get them shipped free right to your door. We're also brought to you by ISOTUNES, makers of my favorite PPE. They make Bluetooth headphones that are OSHA and NIOSH compliant to be used as hearing protection in the workplace. My favorite pair are the Pro 2.0 because they have a built-in mic with noise cancellation, so I can make calls in the shop and be able to talk to the person on the other end of the line, and they can hear me as well. They come in really handy when I have to call in orders or get tech support while I'm out in the shop and all the equipment and grinders are running. And as a bonus, I'm protecting my hearing. Get $10 off your first pair when you go to ISOTUNES.com and use ARCJunkies10 in the comment section at checkout. We're also brought to you by Lincoln Electric. You all know Lincoln Electric makes great machines and consumables, but what you might not know is they also have great classes for educators, welders, engineers, weld inspectors, and more. I'm actually taking a class this week on welding procedure development in Atlanta. My best advice for people in welding is to never stop learning, and the best way to do that is to continue your education as often as possible. And you can do that by attending classes, workshops, and seminars at Lincoln Electric. They do seminars all over the U.S. The class I'm actually taking in Atlanta, Georgia is also available in Los Angeles, Houston, and Cleveland this year. In addition to the welding procedure development class, Lincoln is offering classes on weld inspection, CWI seminars, educator workshops, robotics, and more. It's never too early or too late to increase your knowledge about welding. The more you know about the different specifications, processes, and technology available, the more you're going to be worth. Always invest in yourself and you'll come out ahead. You can find more information on the Lincoln Electric classes and seminars by going to lincolnelectric.com and clicking on the Education tab. You can also save 10% on welding machines and fume extractors when you go to store.lincolnelectric.com and use code word ARCJunkies10. Or you can save 20% on all gear and accessories when you use ARCJunkies20. That's store.lincolnelectric.com. Lincoln Electric, the welding experts. All right, you know what time it is. Fire up your machines, drop your hood, and turn me up 5.
This is Dabs Wellington, and you're listening to the Arc Junkies Podcast.
You're listening to the Arc Junkies Podcast, helping you make every weld better than your last with each episode. And now your host, Jason Becker.
All right, Weston, welcome to the show, man. I appreciate you taking the time. I've talked about your product several times on the podcast, just telling people about it, getting the Picket Master on the, it's a great tool, and just kind of, reaching out, having you come on the podcast and everything. I appreciate your time. I mean, we're going to get into talking about the product, but first, how did you start off in your welding career?
So my old man was a diesel mechanic for the city. And, being the city and the county, he worked at the airport a bunch, but, being a diesel mechanic, you got to know everything. You got to be a welder, electrician, a mechanic. So he always loved welding. And I'd say like 12 or 13, he bought a new truck and he's like, hey, we're going to weld up some side steps. And he had me out there. Here you go. I mean, running some 70-18 on the ground on my knees. And I learned right away, like, here's your weld. Okay, that didn't work. Grind that thing out and start over. So he taught me a lot, about fabrication and just maintenance too. So that's kind of how I got into it. And then right at about 16 or 17, I was washing dishes and shit like that for jobs. And he's like, you're going to be a welder. I'm like, okay. So he dropped me off at the ornamental iron shop down the street. It was one of the old style shops. They got a job right away and took off from there, just doing a bunch of ornamental fences, gates. I really love doing that. And I'm still doing that I've been doing that on the side for a long time. Since then, that was 20 years ago. There's
a big industry in that stuff. And that's kind of like when I wasn't doing structural steel iron work, that's what I was doing. I was working with a guy out of his shop. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like I want to say that the first year that he told me the numbers, the first year that he opened his business, he cleared like $600,000.
Easy.
And it's just insane.
There's so much work, especially right now. How many little guys there are, even in Utah alone, but across the country, there's so many little shops doing this ornamental stuff, doing railings, gates, and fences, and it's not easy stuff. I know some of the pipeliners and stuff are like, it's easy fences and gates. No, it's you got to get the measurements just right. All the codes you got to match. Everything's got open, close. It's in all the different styles. You can do thousands of different styles of work. So it's been a really good career to do and mess with that stuff. And you're also you can make anything with it. It's the same thing as building a table. It's the same skill sets. Mm-hmm. So it's a pretty cool job. I've always enjoyed doing that.
Yeah, I'd go over to his place and we'd do gates, handrails, stair rails, grab rails. I mean, pretty much everything. And I mean, he had it down to an exact science to where he could just look at the gate and then he had like a linear a cost per linear foot that he would charge. And that was like, essentially that would cover the material, the labor, and the powder coat and install. I mean, like, he had it down to an exact science.
Oh yeah, you have to. And it takes a little while to figure that out. And you do get a lot of guys that it takes a while at first. You're sitting there and you got to bid out your job. Mm-hmm. So you call the steel supplier, how much it's going to cost. Then you got to figure out how much you want to make. And you're guessing your hours for a while once you figure out, I know cut times this, weld times this, then I got to drive it to the powder coater, go pick it up. And that's where some guys get burned. They forget about all that little time of driving to pick up the steels, waiting for the steel yard to load you up.
Yeah.
Waiting for the powder coater to paint it. But
there's a lot of work that goes into it, especially like when you're, when you put like the curves and stuff in there. So, you got to roll out the tubing or, the flat stock or whatever, to kind of match the contour, and then just trying to figure out how you're going to do that because it's got one shape or one look on a print. And a lot of times the prints aren't, like the best thing. So they're not telling you the radius, so now you got to kind of figure out what your picket sizes and everything are and your picket spacing. Cause like you said, you got to match codes and all that stuff. And so you got to figure that stuff out, as you're going. And it takes a while to kind of develop that knack because I remember rolling up in the shop trying to help him out. He had all like these quick little tricks to get things done and get it moving and like just banding material together when you put it up on the saw. So if you got to cut your pickets and everything, you're not cutting them one at a time. You take like a bundle of 10, you square up the edge and then you duct tape everything together. And, that way it stays all together as you're feeding it through the saw and cutting it.
Oh yeah. I still do that because I picked up an Ellis a few months ago. So I got a nice Ellis horizontal bandsaw. And I learned back then on a big Kalamazoo, I think it cut 20 inches across, pretty easy. Nothing huge like these. Like you guys probably ran doing the ironworker stuff. Those saws are even bigger. But what we would do with the bundles is just weld the backs up, squish it up, weld out all the butts together, and then you're not going to fall apart. And you just push it through and cut 30 inches, boom, 30 inches, boom, 30 inches. And where like an ironworker's one of the handiest tools that a ornamental guy can get. It can really save him so much work if you can set up your shear to be cutting all your pickets for you and for punching your square holes and stuff too. I finally picked one up a few years ago, and once you can punch a square hole and weld on the bottom of the channel iron, it's mind-boggling how much time you can save by not having to weld all the way around your picket. You can just weld one side, two sides on the bottom of that channel, and it's strong as it'll ever be.
Yeah, that's exactly how he had it set up. The iron worker that he had like a little shelf block on there so you could punch through channel, because sometimes the channel's only inch and a half wide, and then you're putting like a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch picket in there. So he had like the square punch and everything set up, and we'd lay everything out, the top and then the mid and then the bottom piece of square tube, or I'm sorry, the
channel.
Yeah, the top channel, the bottom channel, and then the top piece of square tube. We could go through and punch everything through. And now all your spacing's, set up for the most part, if you lay it out correctly, and then you just kind of feed the square tubes in there, and it essentially builds the gate itself, and then you just square it up, tack it together, and weld it out. It's a lot faster.
Yeah, and go ahead and weld a jig on your table to hold that middle rail or the bottom rail, so you don't have to measure after that. And you can just set up and make like a little mini jig on your table every time and just go fast.
Yeah, he was a big fan of working, like everything that we built was on sawhorses. So like, because like some of the gates that he would do, they're like 30, 40 foot long. And, so like he would just, instead of, having a table in his shop or several tables connected together, we would build everything right there on a sawhorse. And it was just insane. He took that amount of time and detail because he had the footer for his shop poured, and like he made sure that entire floor was like perfectly, surfaced and flat. So that
would help.
When he built the sawhorses, he set it on there. He knows it's nice and flat, and then you could build it, like I said, up to 40 feet long, because the powder coater that we have here, and it's like right out in Kissimmee, it's the largest powder coating oven in the state of Florida, and they can do 40 feet. So he can build these like massive ass gates instead of having to build, a couple of 20 footers, get them powder coated, and then, weld them together and blend them in the field. He's able to, knock out a 40 footer and just take it in there and get it sandblasted and painted all, or powder coated in one shot.
That'd be really nice. Yeah, I've always ran a table and then third hands. So I'd have a table that I could get to from 3 sides at least.
Okay.
And then I'll have a bunch of third hands that are set up for that high, and I could continue my runs farther over, which sawhorses work great. And I've seen a lot of cool tables. They're building like slot tables more so. That are 4 ornamental, and they have bigger gaps. So you got like a 2-inch gap where you can always get a big clamp in there, a nice 11-inch Sherwin in there, clamp everything right to it. And then one big trick I've always done, and I learned it back at the shop when I first started, was to make a big square on your table. So your back of your table and like your right hand, whatever hand you are, is to do like a 3-inch angle iron around the table. Mm-hmm. So you always have a reference point of 90 degrees. And that way you can drop down for doing your pitches. You can get your rise and run really easy. And just for squaring everything up, it's always square. You don't have to worry about anything racking.
Oh, that's nice.
And then you weld it hard and you go install it and everything's off by a couple degrees and it looks bad.
Yeah.
And then you have somewhere to clamp to as well. That's how I've always ran my table, which you do what you're taught pretty much, Yeah.
That's a good way to do it, because I always find myself, like just drawing that right angle on, and then just matching everything up to that. But yeah, I could see like, welding a piece of angle iron on there and getting a true 90 degrees in there, if that's the type of work you're doing repetitively.
I think it could work good even for these jig tables, have one that bolts right in all in the same spot every time. And if you're always building something square, that's a big thing. So if you have a reference point, it's a really cool way to start. Is, I'll measure it here. It's 10 inches and the top's 10 inches. So having a reference has been really handy. That's kind of how I've always ran. And then you got all your pocket underneath. You got all your scabbards and stuff. You want to build it standing upright or not. But I've always welded flat on the table. I've got buddies building railings standing straight up now and just killing it that way. They're building them on sawhorses, but standing up like they would be installed. Mm-hmm. And they're really cool ways of doing it. They set in a few pickets, they square them up, especially with the fireballs and stuff, they get them clamped in and everything stays there, and they're pumping out a bunch of railings doing it that way too.
Nice. Yeah, we always did them flat, and then we'd pick them up.
Yep.
We had like a overhead crane, so you'd weld one side out, and then it's enough to be able to flip it, and then you just kind of grab it, from the center, flip it over, and then weld that whole thing out, and then pick it up, set it down, and then start building the next one.
And you probably did a bunch of aluminum ones too, right? Being in Florida,
90% of his work was all aluminum because, it was all going by like pools or out by the beach or, some like rich dude's house or whatever, out on the coast. 90% of it, I would say, if not more, was aluminum. And then when he was really, really particular with it, like you couldn't, once you start getting through like the finishing process and blending, like everything had to be freaking perfect. So that's where I kind of developed good grinding skills because before, you just go ham on it. But like once they put that powder coat, you're going to be able to see every scratch, dink or ding, dent, everything in there. And then just handling the material after it's been cleaned. Like he was really big on that. Like you got to wear like clean gloves or, go wash your hands in bare hand because, I guess you get problems with the powder coating not wanting to stick. So once we got done building it, we'd actually go wash it down with like a water and acid mix just to get everything off, and then hose it down with regular water to neutralize it or wash it off, and right on the trailer, and then they'd pick it up there at the powder coaters and get it all handled for you.
Yeah, I didn't see aluminum rails until I was like 17 and went on a trip, 17 or 18, went on a trip to Florida to see my grandpa because it's all steel here. Like there's no reason. We're in Salt Lake. It gets rusty, but it's not ocean rust. It's just they'll rust out over 20 years, and then we got to go fix them and replace them. But you just don't see aluminum here. Mm-hmm. So it's cool to see all those out there because we just throw them together and beat the crap out of them,
Yeah.
Sit there at the wash tank to get all the factory oil off and burn them up, and they wash them before they paint them. Mm-hmm. We used to cheat a lot. The shop I worked at, he didn't like powder coating because it cost money. Yeah, so he'd hire in-house painters. And with that, it's cool because, you could hide stuff. If there was a weird hole, we'd get to throw in some Bondo into that little crack. Yep. So if it looks good, it's good. And if it's going to hold up, it's going to hold up. So that's where I learned a lot about it with ornamental iron is if it looks good and you can fudge something if it isn't right, but if it looks good, it's good. Mm-hmm. And it has to be strong too. I'm not saying like to fudge the strength and it's going to fall over, but that's a lot of it is you got to make it look good. Yeah. And sometimes like the wall's not plumb. So you got to fudge your pickets a little bit to make it so you hide that wall being out of plumb, or you move it farther over than you'd want to. And now that's a big thing with the ornamental stuff is you want to build it exactly perfect, but there's a lot of times you cannot.
Yeah, it's got to be aesthetics. You got to match things up. So sometimes you got to build things intentionally out of square to make it look square once you install it.
Oh yeah. And you got to think about like your tabs when you weld your tab onto the bottom of your square tube post. Sometimes that concrete's not flat. And so you got to remember, maybe I should check that when you're measuring a job that the concrete's not flat. So you got to pitch every one of your tabs so they're a little 1 degree out, so you don't have a big gap around all your tabs where they all bolt down with your cement anchors and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that guys got to think about when they're doing this.
Yeah.
And that's where with the Picket Master, getting all your spacing just right really speeds things up too.
Definitely. So how did you transition from like doing ornamental to working on ski lifts? Because I mean, you mentioned you work on ski lifts and stuff too.
So my dad is a mechanic, so I got into mechanics a bit, as I was working on cars and stuff. And then of course I followed a girl. So I followed my wife to New Zealand to go skiing. And I show up there and they're like, do you know how to fix ski lifts? I'm like, no, you want to? Yeah. So I spent a season there fixing ski lifts for them and learned how to do it there a little bit. And it was super fun experience. And then I got back here. I'm like, I need a job. So I'm like, I want to do that. That was way cooler than welding. And it's so I got into skiing up in Park City, got into Deer Valley and a lift mechanic there and been there for 15 years now. And it's definitely a little bit different than normal day welding, fixing galvanized chairs and cracks and
galvanized
whole bunch of NDT inspected welds and making sure they're doing what the guy says that's a crack and I got to go grind it out and weld it back in. So that's a pretty neat process. All of our chairs, we have to inspect every weld on the chair in case they crack. They get fatigues and all that. So guys go in with the magnetic. What the NDT is the
mag particle?
the mag particle is what they're using mostly on the the powdered one out in the field. And then in the shop, we're using a lot of the dye penetrate.
Yep.
So, but in the shop, they're shooting the grips. We got to rebuild the grip that actually clamps to the rope. That needs to be rebuilt. And the chair needs to be inspected every 3 years, I think it is.
Okay.
Each chair. So we tear those things apart all the time. They're just getting torn down, inspected, finding cracks, going through, cleaning those cracks out, and they're all galvanized. Every chair is. So it's a good bit of work to clean that out. And then you're running a 7018, and I've kind of been switching over to flux core lately, just because it's so much easier on that thin gauge stuff, and it's just a better weld anymore.
Yeah. That Lincoln's got a good one for like thin gauge material that works really well on galvanized. It's NR211.
Yep.
Yeah, that stuff works really good on galvanized.
Yeah, I've used a lot of that, but lately I switched over to Rockmount stuff. Yeah. Actually, once you've had them on your podcast, I got some of their flux core, that Polaris, and that stuff just welds amazing.
Dude, that stuff's insane, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's so fun to use.
Like, what do you need to weld? Everything. Okay, what are we going to use? Polaris, Brutus, like all that stuff is... I don't know.
Their products...
Put some witchcraft in there, man. It's like, it does what it shouldn't be able to do.
Oh, yeah, and it welds uphill great, downhill even good, because I had a bunch of cracks on a bull wheel I had to fix, a whole bunch, and I had to gouge out the crack, and it's 1-inch plate, so I'm going all the way through 1-inch plate and following these cracks. And then you got to fill all that back in. Yeah. The cracks are only a good 4 inches long. So with 7018, it'd take me days to do one weld. But with running that Polaris, I'm going through and getting it done in a couple hours. And it's a super strong weld that just looks good. Almost every weld looks great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I first heard about it, man, I was like, this is way too good to be true. And they like sent me sample packs and everything. And I probably took a day and a half with my students. We were in the lab, and I was like, all right, we just had the little, actually, I got the book right here. I turned to page 1, and it's like, okay, let's grab this rod out of the box and mess with that. And it was like, damn, it does exactly what it's supposed to. Okay, on to the next one. I mean, we went so far as to taking a plate, and we painted it that morning. And then in the afternoon, we had covered it with, what did we put on there? We put packing grease on there. We put hydraulic oil on there and cutting fluid. Just like right on top of the surface. I mean, it looked freaking nasty. And we're like, all right, let's run a bead on there and see if we got porosity. Welded across it, no problem. It burnt everything back, no porosity, nice clean weld. Tried it with a typical 7018, porosity all over the place, nasty looking weld. So it's I don't know what to put in there, but this stuff's crazy.
Oh, it's magic. Have you used any of their aluminum MIG wire yet?
No, I haven't.
So I met up with Pat.
Okay, Pat Adams.
I went over to his place and welded a light pole with them a couple weeks ago. I did one of their YouTubes with them. Oh, cool. And that stuff was magic, dude. Like welding with that, we were welding cast aluminum that was covered in powder coated, been sitting outside for a while, and my welds didn't look terrible. I'm not the best aluminum MIG welder at all, and I ended up getting them looking pretty dang good. Like I had huge gaps, like big 1/4 inch to even 1/2 inch holes, and I was able to fill those right in with that stuff. Nice. I'm a big fan.
Yeah. So does, working with the ski lifts and everything, does that keep you pretty busy year round, or are you kind of working seasonal because everything's pretty much up and running, during certain times of the year?
No, we're year round. Yeah, we're there year round. So it's like 2 different jobs, truly. So in the winter, we're sitting there waiting for stuff to break, because we need to be there to fix whatever happened. So we're sitting there waiting for whatever broke. And it's all kinds of stuff. You get your electric faults, you get a mechanical fault. We got to get there and get the lift going again. And then come springtime, time to tear it all apart and put it back together. So then in the spring, we're going through and, like I said, checking all the chairs, checking all the electric motors, changing oil and everything, getting it all top shelf back to where it was, even better. And then sometimes we're building tools to make our job easier. So a lot of my job there is actually building tools to make everybody's life easier. Build a bunch of spools to spool up rigging cables. We've done quite a bit of different winches and stuff like that. We got to build a lot of stuff like that.
Okay. It's
a lot of tool building. And then all the presses. I just finished a press the other day for pushing bushings. So all the grips have bushings. It's because you can't have steel on steel, so they have glacier bushings. So we're pushing out all these bushings over and over and over and over again. Push them out, push them in. So it's just a whole bunch of repetitive work, truly.
Okay.
It's a pretty fun gig, but yeah, we were there all year round.
So you guys use steel cable to support them, or you said rope earlier? Is that, I'm assuming it's steel cable?
In ski lift we call it, it's all steel cable, but we call it a haul rope.
I got you.
is kind of in the industry. I'm sure some industries don't like that. They want to hear it as a cable, but we got to go both names with it. But a lot of our rope inspectors and splicers call them a rope.
Now, how often does that stuff have to get inspected?
Every year. So we get the rope inspected every year from a out-of-house contractor. Comes in with, it's a really cool process. He comes in and puts this big magnet with all these wires coming out of it. And what it's reading is it can read the magnetic. Let's see if I can get this right. So it's actually can read how much magnetic material is inside of that magnet. So it's reading the steel that's in there, and it knows if there's a crack by a break in magnetic material that was supposed to be there. And it uses a big sine wave. So he just sits there, clamps this thing on there, runs the lift right through it. So it's not an X-ray or anything like people think. It's this big magnet that can read how much magnetic material is there. And he can find a crack. Then he goes back and we look at it by hand. And there's a code of how many cracks per lay of cable that a ski lift can have. And it's a lot less than like a crane can have. Cranes can have quite a bit more than we can. But the ropes end up lasting like 30 years, 40 years. We have some quite old ones out there that we just oil them up once a year and run the crap out of them.
Shit. We used to do it over at, I worked at a specific theme park, and they have a ferry that'll fly from one area, to another. And we always had to do like a rope inspection or like steel cable inspection. But I mean, what we had to do is night shift would take a spool down, or they had like a tugger and everything so they could pull the cable down, and we'd have to replace the cable like every so often. But they literally had a white glove inspection because I think they could only do like 3 runs or something like that on the cable. And then after that, they retire the cable, and then they string a whole new set of cable up. So we would get, this specific type of cable that would come into the yard, and we'd have to set it up on a drum, put it on a tugger and everything, and we'd have to re-spool it onto another piece. But like in that re-spooling process is when they would do the inspection, because we had to transfer it from like an old wooden spool to this like hand, or like, I don't want to say homemade, but like this fabricated aluminum spool that was specifically built for this tugger to run the cable up there. And they would literally come out and do a white glove test, and he'd put a white glove on, and he'd go through every inch of that freaking cable. And just to make sure that there's no like stray wire, there's no crimps, there's no crushes. I mean, like one time we went through, like they rejected 5 spools of wire. Mind you, they pay for every spool that they're inspecting. We just use it for something else, but they were like, nope, order another one in. So we'd always order like 2 or 3 at a time. But he'd go through and he'd make sure there's no nicks, dings, dents, nothing in there. And like one time I walked over and he's rejecting it. And I was like, just out of curiosity, like, why are you rejecting it? And he goes, feel this area right here. And I was like, okay. And he goes, it's not perfect. And I was like, oh, wow. Damn, okay. And he's like, you got to remember, we have a human life hanging from this thing, and they have to, it's like, I can't remember the length of it, but I mean, it's like a long ass ride for, the person that's zip lining across an audience. Yep. So not only is it like a person. Oh, okay. Yeah. So not only is it a person like suspended from this on a little zip line, it's over, guests, we'll call them. But it was a pretty neat, it was a pretty neat, system and process to be a part of and watch,
that's
and how
pretty
much
similar
care
to
they
what
took
we're
in it.
Yeah, that's about how we are, but it doesn't have to be quite as critical. There's ANSI codes for it that we follow very strictly. If any incidents happen with the rope, we bring in our out-of-house inspector, and he checks it all. And he'll do visuals on some of the ropes too. And he can just sit there with his eye and watch for them, and it's all logged, so we know where a crack would be. And you can't have very many. It's not that many cracks. The broken wires that you can have, and that's a wire. How cable works. It's a whole bunch of wires make a strand, and then it's usually 6 strands make a cable. So on those, talking about the little tiny wires that are breaking, they're really not a big safety issue when you have a whole bunch of them. Yeah, they're overbuilt. Ski lifts are very overbuilt. That's what's nice about them.
It's like everything else. There's like a safety factor 10-to-1 in there.
Oh yeah, big time.
Especially when you get humans hanging from it and everything. Even though like, I would imagine like what's the height that you're dealing with on those? I mean, like I've never been on a ski lift.
Never been on a ski lift. No. Dang, yeah, we're up like 60 feet. Oh, 60 damn. To, I think we have some that are even pushing 70 to 80 feet. Okay. But it's a 42 mil cable that we're running on almost everything. So it's quite a large cable.
Pretty beefy.
It can hold, oh yeah. When we have to, one of the fun jobs we got to do is, if we have to splice it together, it's woven inside of itself. So you open it up and you actually take the strands out and shove it back into itself. And that kind of is what clamps it all together. Is it pinches it kind of like the old yellow ropes. You know how you'd splice those and you'd shove them back into themselves. It's that same similar theory. But to do that, we have to pull tension on these cables. And we're talking like 30,000 pounds of force that we have to pull to get these separated and then sit there and have it locked out so we can work on it. And that's 30,000 pounds on each side of us. So it's going to be pretty dangerous work.
Yeah.
And that's just to take these apart so we can shorten them or usually just shorten them. You know, they stretch their cables, so they got to stretch, especially new ones and a new install. And it takes a good 15 guys to splice these together, and one guy just yelling at everybody and telling you how to do it. Because it's not something that just anybody can figure out. It has to be tucked just right in because it needs to be very smooth along that cable so that grip where the chair grabs isn't bigger right there and can fall off. It has to all be the same diameter. So it's a big process to splice one of these ski lift cables together.
Pretty technical.
Oh yeah, and it's super heavy. You know, a 42 mil cables, it weighs like, I don't know, probably 6 pounds a foot. So when you're dealing with 150, 200 feet of that at one time, it gets heavy.
Yeah, I would imagine so. You make a man out of you real quick.
Oh yeah, it's a good time. It's a good one to sit there and yell at your buddies with. Give each other some shit for sure on that day.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think 42 mil is like 1.25 inches or somewhere around there.
It's a little bigger than that, about a little over 1.5 inches.
Okay.
They're pretty big. Yeah, it's a really massive. Pretty good job.
Yeah, I've seen the guys on Instagram where they've got it like looping chokers and stuff like that. How they make the chokers in the shop, and like you got to undo the end and then kind of loop it and then braid it back into itself, and then put that swedge lock on there, and it's like, damn, like big dudes just fighting this cable and awesome. Forcing it. I mean, they're like jacked.
I've seen those. Those guys are badass. We've done a bunch of that too because we'll use old cable, or we used to. Anymore, we're getting some money so we can buy nice rigging, but we've had to make long tag lines out of old ski lift cables. So we'd put big Molly Hogans on the ends of them, kind of with that. So we're just putting on a couple clips on the ends to hold it together once we Molly Hogan it and weave it back together. But it's be that same theory. We're sitting there dealing with those huge cables. You got 5 of us little tiny skinny dudes trying to do this. And you watch those big dudes, they do it one guy while the other dude's laughing at them. It's pretty fun stuff messing with that big cable. Mm-hmm. Unless you got to drag it all the way up the hill. That's not very much fun.
Right. So now
that day gets old.
How did you get into like running your own side business while you're doing, ski lift repairs and stuff?
So yeah, ever since once I learned how to weld, my old man was a big motivator to get you working. So he'd always have a buddy. Yeah, you want to build this guy a fence? You want to build this guy a railing? And that's always just led into more and more side work from different people. So if somebody finds out that I know how to weld, hey, you want to build this for me? Yeah, I'll build that for you. So ever since I started, I remember in high school. So I took welding in high school, like a lot of back when we could. And I built a bumper for the teacher, for one of my teachers in high school. So I've been doing side work since then for quite a while. But nowadays, if somebody calls up, hey, can you build this? Yeah, I can build that. Do you know how? Sure, I know how. Let's get her done.
Yeah.
And it's just been, some weekends you got to work extra, but it helps get the kids a little more things around the house for them to play with and pays for those vacations a little better.
Yeah. Yeah. Side work's always a bonus. Or always a
bonus. Yeah, it is. I'm a big fan of side work. I recommend it to any of us who are welding. Like, get a machine. It's going to pay. It's going to help you out. Even if you don't want to go full time and be stressed out, just get one. Even just a portaband or a chop saw, and just get some work done in your garage. If you can, some of these places, it's hard in some places, but find a little place you can show up and work, do some side work, whatever it can be. If it's building a gate or you got to weld some beams together or just art, one of the things we did for years was we did the locals farmers market selling handmade metal art, fire pits and flowers and stuff like that. And there's a lot of money in that. Mm-hmm. People love those flowers.
Yeah. I know a couple of people that actually run welding machines they've got an apartment and they'll run like little tiny 200 amp machines.
Cool.
They'll plug it, unplug the stove, plug the welding machine in and sit there and do TIG welding right there in the kitchen.
And that's what's nice about TIG welding. You can.
Yeah. Just
you need
a small bottle.
Machine.
And just anything that doesn't generate sparks and everything. But yeah, I mean, Aluminum, you might piss the neighbors off a little bit, running some high frequency in there, but like you could do a lot of steel and stainless and stuff, a little tiny work. Open the window, set up a little fan and just go to town with it. Yeah,
it's a skill that I really hope that everybody out there listening is actually pushing it to that level. Like, especially nowadays where you can pick up a Everlast or Prime, any of these little machines for almost nothing. They can get them for a couple $100,
mm-hmm.
and they can make some money.
Yeah, you can make a lot of money off a small. I mean, like for $500-$600 investment. I mean, you can make your money back in a couple of months if you know what you're doing. I mean, you can make ridiculous money, whether it's like artwork or like just mobile repairs or people bringing stuff to your shop. Hell, like you could put a little ad. You can still do it like in the marketplace on Facebook. But for a while there, like when I first got into teaching and I was doing side work all over the place, I was putting ads on Facebook like, hey, I'll weld your stuff up. And I had people that they have like these really cool concepts and ideas, and they're like, hey, I've got everything, but I don't know how to weld. So like, I'm going to bring everything to you and it's already cut, fit, ready to go. Just slap it together. I'll show you where it meets up. You do the welds and then I'll pay you. And I mean, you can make a quick $40-$60 in, less than an hour.
Oh yeah. I've always pushed out with anybody that I'm working with. It's a welders, like get a machine, figure out who needs the work and do it for them. If it's fixing the trailer, or if you're in a more rural area and you go help the farmer out a little bit who has a machine but doesn't know how to use it, or he's scared his welds won't hold if he fixes the tractor a little bit, you go over there and use his stuff. Whatever a guy's got to do to pull in that little bit extra money really is going to help out your family and stuff, because some of these jobs pay good money, but not all of them do. Some of these welding gigs, you're told you're going to make a bunch of money, and you do in a while, but to start off, you got to keep pushing that.
Yeah, it depends on where you bid, and I mean that's all going to come with experience. And like a lot of times, when I first started off doing it, I shot myself in the foot a lot of times. I was like, oh yeah, I can do that for X amount of dollars, and like there's a lot of things that you overlook or don't take into consideration. Like you're one broken drill bit away from a $300 repair that you might only have like $150 in the job. So there's things you got to plan out, contingencies, and there's a lot of stuff to consider, and you get that with time. But yeah, I mean, like a welding machine and probably a 6-inch grinder. I mean, you can get a lot of stuff done until you can afford to buy a portaband, and then you do a little bit more work, and then you get a chop saw, and then you do a little bit more work, and you just keep building up your collection.
That's exactly how I built my shop. Exactly that way. It's all been side work money. Like, and I have an iron worker. I just picked up a plasma CNC, little tiny one. I've got big Ellis bandsaw, drill presses, all the tools the shop would have. I've purchased them that way by just doing a job. You'd buy, okay, I got to get this job done. I'll do that. And I got a big cup. I have 2 millers out there. Like it's all been side work. Hustling and buying the tools when you need it.
Yeah.
And hopefully you bid a job and you're like, okay, I need this tool. Let's go add a little bit more and see if they say yes. And if they say yes, you got the job. And that's the cool thing with side work is you don't have to do it. You got a paycheck at home. Or you got a paycheck coming in from your day job. So if you don't want to do this job, bid it high. You're going to get it still. So bid it high and buy you that new tool.
I remember like I used to do that all the time. It's like I would bid job specifically to get the tool that I needed to do the job, and then put the cost of that equipment like right in there into the bid. I mean, you don't add it as a line item, but I mean,
don't never tell them.
Yeah, that's part of the labor, part of the consumables and materials. You can bury that in there. But I remember the first job that I had to bid, and it was funny because the guy that I was working for, doing work in his shop, building the ornamental railings and stuff like that, I got him a teaching gig at the school where I first started. And because he was kind of retiring, he was giving up his shop. And so once he found out, I was going to start my own small business, he's like, well, here's a couple of clients for you. Here's some people that, know, that I was working for that, now that I'm not doing it, they need somebody. So I was like, okay, cool. So I started making some phone calls and getting some jobs and everything. So then I was running my bids by him. And I was like, what do you think about this? And he looks at it and he goes, you're not charging enough. And I was like, are you kidding me?
Yep.
Like, no, this should be plenty. Like, I want to remain competitive. And he goes, if you do that, you're just going to be cutting your own throat. Like you need to, he's like, add $45 an hour more to your hourly rate. And I was like, really? He's like, they'll buy off on it. They'll accept the bid. Trust me. And I was like, I remember I submitted that first bid and I just sat there and waited for the email to come back. Like, hey, you're too high. And like, the next morning I got an email. Hey, done. When can you be here? Wow. So then I bid the next job and I ran it by him and he's like, nope, you're still too low on this one. I was like, really? So I bump it up and then got that job. And like, I just kept getting job after job after job. And I was always running my bids through him until I kind of figured out and got my footing, because, you know, going from like working in the field or, you know, working in a trade, like, you know what you make per hour. And you're like, oh, you know, if I charge like $10 more than what I'm making per hour, I can make a pretty decent living and do that. And it's like, no, don't charge that low. You're gonna shoot yourself in the foot.
Yep, and all it takes is you get the job, like you said, you get the job done. You misquoted on the price of steel, or you didn't do your math quite right, and you needed 6 more sticks, and you're screwed if you're pushing your margins out low, and you don't need to.
Yep.
And I know a lot of shops, I don't know if they're shops, but these fly-by-night outfits that are doing that, and they're charging nothing because they don't care if they just have to work or whatever. Who knows why they're doing it. And I don't get how they would stay in business because of that reason. If you, I did the math wrong, or you ordered too much steel that you didn't need, and a guy needed that money, like it can hurt you. Or if the paint shop decided to double the price for you that week, you got to make money doing this. And there is a lot of money to make in welding right now. Mm-hmm. And there always has been. There always will be. That's what's cool with all this small shop stuff like I do, and a lot of these guys that I've been selling the Picketmaster to, is they're all just killing it right now. Yeah. It's really good to see.
So I want to go back and talk about the Picketmaster, because like I've seen your product, and I want to say that it might have popped up on Instagram as an ad, or I might have been following you ahead of time. I can't remember like how exactly I came across the Picketmaster, but I was talking about it to a guy that I work with because he builds railings and stuff on the side. And I was like, you gotta check out one of these tools. And like, I finally got one. You sent me one. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, man.
But it's a really awesome, very simple yet effective, intuitive tool to increase speed. And that, like, when you're doing fabrication work and talking volume and production and precision and stuff like that, it's a tool that it's not just going to save you money, but it's going to make you money.
Yep. That's why I started doing them, because, you know, I've always had my side business going on. Like I said, I've been doing it forever, but I never had that tool. So when I'd build railings, I'd have to do the math. And when I worked at a shop, we had something similar to these. We had a it never had a name on it. I don't even know who made it or anything about it, but we had them on every table, and you'd lay out your pickets with that. It spread it out from center to each side and mark them and call it good. Go to the other side, mark it good, you get under code, and you're done. You don't have to sit there and do the math, because in a shop, it's wasting time when there's a tool to do it, no matter what the job is. If it's using a drill instead of a screwdriver, or a screwdriver instead of a drill, you're wasting time when you could go faster. So a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, it was right when COVID hit, really. It's about when it was. I was hanging out of the house a lot, needed something to do, and I started playing with my kids' Legos, you know? Like, I just made an equal divider with Legos. So I went out to the shop, cut up some aluminum to match what I did with the Legos. And then I made them out of aluminum for a few years. Yeah, that's all I've done is Instagram. I pushed them on Instagram so hard. I'm sure about all your listeners have been commented by me to check it out. I'm like, probably harassed some people a few too many times, but it's worked good. And I'm sorry if I bugged anybody out there, but I'm probably still going to bug you again, and got to push it somehow. I don't have any marketing team. It's just me. 100% me and my wife. She'll help me put them together and sew the cases for them. But yeah, we've pushed on Instagram. We've done really well with it. And I just want to help shops speed up. Like most guys haven't seen anything like this. Especially if you come from like where you came from, the ironworkers and stuff. You don't know you know how to build a railing, but you've never seen something like this.
No, and like what I used to do is I would have to do the math. And like, that's why I'm such a big proponent or fanboy of the Construction Master calculator, because now I can add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions and all that stuff. But like, I would have to figure out, okay, what's going to be my picket spacing? Okay, how big is my picket? Okay, well, I got to add half the thickness into my picket for, you know, inside to inside spacing, or, you know, whatever your spacing is going to be. And let's say I got 60 pickets that I got to throw on this rail. Now I got to hook my tape measure and like clamp it, especially if you're working by yourself. And now I got to go through and measure, and, you know, with my calculator, and just hit equals 60 times.
And you're going to screw up.
And then you get to the end.
Halfway through, you're going to hit the wrong button, and it's going to go back to 0, or it's going to double.
Yeah, or you get to the end and your spacing's off, and you're like, oh, shit, I forgot to add, you know, like a 16th in there, and a 16th in 60 different spaces. I mean, that adds up really quick. So then you find out that, oh, well, now I'm not in code because I got to maintain like a minimum of 3 7/8, you know, width between the pickets, and like I've got a 5-inch gap at the end. It's like, shit, now I got to shift everything. So I could see where like the Picket Master would like, once you figure that spacing out, you just, spread that thing out, lock it in place. And now you've got all your little tick marks through the whole way.
That's exactly what I started doing them for. And I didn't start this trying to sell it, at all. I just built one for me. I'm like, cool, I finally have one. And then I looked at it for a couple of days, like, I need to share this. Like, this is going to help a lot of people out. And it has. But just like you're saying, you just to be able to to spread it out and not screw up and to be able to adjust it. You start off at one point, you're like, okay, that's 2 3/8. I want to push as close to 4 as I can. You get to 3.5, you go, oh, I'm at 5 1/4. You come back, you know where it is. Mm-hmm. And it's just to get that speed, I really hope it's helping all these guys out. Because especially in these little shops, time is money. When like we've been talking, like if you're doing this side job, you allocated 4 hours to it, but if it added a half hour to it, that cuts into your profit. Mm-hmm. So that's where tools speed up your job at once you can afford to get them.
Yeah, like another application that I see, using like a Picket Master is doing weld spacing. So if I got to do like different weld spacings, like a 3-on-6 or 3-on-12 or whatever the case may be, I can set that out and it's equal spaced. So now I can set the left side of the weld and then the right side of the weld and just kind of shift that tool right down the line and mark everything and lay everything out.
I've got quite a few heavy equipment welders doing that. Your stitch welding your bucket or your stitch welding your seam on your gussets, and they want to make them all look really good. They want to look like factory. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what they're doing. And I like another cool way. Now all these new machines, you can set your weld parameter so it only welds for 30 seconds or whatever, 20 seconds. So you still only have to mark one side. It goes, the machine shuts off, goes again, the machine shuts off. You don't even have to do your double marks. Mm-hmm. You can just really kick ass with it. And I've got some other shops doing rivet spacing so they could space out the rivets. I even have some HVAC guys who are spacing rivets and screws. They're doing such beautiful HVAC work that they use the Picket Master to space out their screws 2 inches apart all the way across their ductwork they're doing.
I could see that being useful in aerospace too, because a lot of like planes and stuff are held together with pop rivets. Like a lot of people think everything's welded together, and it's all pop riveted.
Not at all.
Yeah,
yeah. And even like for back to the diesel guys, like if you're putting panels back on the side of your Peterbilt, perfect for that because they're all pop riveted on too. At least the old school ones. Mm-hmm. Some of these new ones are just one piece cabs, but those old school cabs, they're all pop riveted back on. Heck, the UPS guy, when he's got to put the new truck, you got to skin the UPS truck again. It's perfect for that. Mm-hmm. So everything looks good. And I just came out with a new version. I don't know if you've seen that. I did a plastic version.
Yeah, I seen that the other day. I actually commented and I was like, damn, that'd be great for leather work.
Oh yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking with it. Is it's the exact same thing, but I'm doing them out of an acrylic, and they're pretty neat. Like I like playing with this thing. It's really fun, and I don't think I'm going to push it to the 12 points just because it gets a little more flexy. But at the 7 point, because we have two products. We have our 12 point and our 7 point version. Mm-hmm. But that's where with this plastic one, it's been pretty cool for seamstresses and leather work and stuff like that, so it doesn't scratch your material. And the aluminum guys, those dudes doing the killer artwork on the aluminum bead rollers and stuff for hot rods. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I first came up with it, because I forget his name on Instagram. There's a guy who's just doing amazingly cool seats and stuff like that, all out of bead rolled aluminum and working like they're doing leather work but out of aluminum.
Okay.
And that's where I thought of doing the plastic a couple of months ago. And we finally got into it, and it's a pretty cool product. I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah. So how many different how many different versions have you come out with the Picket Master? Once you started, you built them out of Legos, and then you went out in the garage, you built them out of aluminum. Like how many iterations of the Picket Master are there?
So yeah, that's what we got. We got our Lego version, which we only got one, and I think the kid took it apart as soon as I left the room.
Oh, you should have framed that.
I wish I did, but then I did them. I used to hand make them all out of aluminum. So I would sit out there in the garage and chop them with the chop saw, just cutting out aluminum. I sit there and cut like 20 sticks at a time and just go crazy. And then I'd have to hand drill every hole. And they worked really good. I think there's a lot of guys still rocking those and just killing it with them. But it was a little more work than I wanted to put into it. And it wasn't as accurate as I wanted. So now we're getting them all laser cut from stainless steel out of a company here in Utah called Oshcuts. They're all a website. They're kind of like Send Cuts. There's another good company doing it too. And you just send in your file, and these guys will tell you the price. You pick the material, and they send you a laser cut product right to your door. And I kind of like working with them because you're not going to like the local shop who's busy doing the same part all the time. And then every time you go, it's a different price. No matter who you talk to, it's a different price. It's working really good. Just have them, they ship it to my door. And then I sit down and put them together and ship them out. And get them delivered to everybody. So yeah, those are about the only 3 styles we've done. I need to go back to that Lego one, I think, here pretty soon. Just limited edition, maybe.
Yeah, there you go. So like now, can you take like 2 sets of them and combine them if I wanted like to make a longer section?
Definitely. You can. So like I think I have quite a people out there who buy the 12 and the 7 and bolt them up. And I don't know if I recommend going that big because, it's all mechanical linkage. So you're going to lose a little bit of accuracy when you get too far out there. So what I've done is on my website, you can actually buy individual blades and make just like 2 or 3 more. So if you find out you're always running 14 pickets, or that's like your number between posts, whatever your number is, you can add on a couple blades and do that. You can customize it and make it the size you want it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to go. I've done that a lot where you can do that pre-order or if you get it, and then you can also come back later and buy them too.
Oh, nice.
Yep. They'll show, I'll send them out to you and you bolt them on. They come with the screws and the nuts. And that's the cool thing. I've heard a lot of people comment like I should use rivets to put these together, but I want a product that's repairable. If you drop your Picket Master in the shop and it bends one of the points over, just message me. I'll send one out to you. And you take it apart, bolt one on. But if it's made of rivets, I'm going to have to send you the rivet. You're going to have to squish it. The tension's not going to be quite right. It might be a little hard, might be a little loose. But with bolting these together, it might look a little bulkier, but I like the fact that I can do that. I can help you service them, and you can add on both factors. If you find out you're only using 6 of it, half of it all the time, you could break it in half and have 2 of them.
I wonder, have you ever used sex bolts at all?
I bought a couple when I started, but I couldn't get the tensions always the way I wanted them.
Yeah, it's got to be like exact size because we used to use them all the time at a theme park that I worked at, but we'd have to like trim them down a little bit. So you got to take that, the female side down a little bit more and then maybe knock a couple threads off the male side just to get it, to fit just so. But yeah, I think they've got variable adjustments in between them, but I mean, you got to be pretty much right on because when they lock in, you can't tighten them down any further.
Nope. And that's where just running the regular bolt through is working good. And then I can screw it in and get the holes to a perfect diameter to where I got to get it the clearance where I want it. And then the tension where I want it. I've checked out the sex bolts. What was the other one? I did the shoulder bolts too, with where they'd have the stop, and I just couldn't quite get anything the way I wanted. And these are working really good, and I hope everybody's liking it. One thing we did used to do wing nuts on them, and I wasn't too happy with how that came out anymore, so I've stopped doing that. So if anybody's interested in doing a wing nut system, let me know. I can add that on, but to tighten them up, I just wasn't happy with how it was coming out, so kind of stopped doing that. That's one of the only things we've really changed since we went laser cut.
Okay. It's been working out pretty good. I mean, since you switched over to laser cut, I mean, obviously you're not out in the shop running the chop saw anymore.
Yeah, it works great. They get a big heavy box, shows up once a month, and me and the kids sit down and bolt them together.
Oh, nice. Put them to work.
Works out pretty good.
Yeah, there's no child labor laws when you own them.
Not at all. They like to help package them and come tape them up. They have a good time with me doing it. And like I said, my wife, she's a seamstress, so we both kind of have this like little home businesses going on. And she'll be downstairs sewing cushions, and then I'll say, hey, I need some more cases. So she pulls out the old vinyl or leather, sews up a little carrying case for me to put them in, and that way shipping makes it easier, and a guy has something nice. I'm hoping to get some foam cut for the Milwaukee packouts to doing a custom box setup for Milwaukee packouts soon. Okay. Been working with a few companies, hoping that'll be launched pretty soon when we get that going.
All right, we'll be right back after a quick word from the supporters of the show. This segment of the Arc Junkies podcast is brought to you by Strong Hand Tools, makers of heavy-duty fabrication tables, toggle clamps, fabrication tools, and accessories. Strong Hand has everything you need to help increase your speed and productivity in the shop. And if you're a student, you can register your school right now for a free gift pack of clamps and accessories by going to stronghandtools.com/arcjunkie. Now let's get back into the show. Yeah, I was going to say that was like the little leather sleeve that it came in was a nice added bonus when I wasn't expecting that, and I got it and I was like, okay, that's like legit, because like, when you think back in the day, like old school, tools that are like, still available today, they came in like a nice custom wood box or like a nice leather carrying case or, something to that effect. And now it's all like a shell, it's just like that plastic, shit that it's a pain in the ass to open up, and like it's junk. As soon as you get the product out, you throw it away.
Oh yeah, it sucks. I have a hard time with that with all products you buy anymore. Like, let it be. I'll have to show up perfect and clean, or people want to return it. Like, so they wrap it in plastic, they wrap it in foam. Everything's just overly packaged, and then we're wasting all that shit. You can't do anything with it. They just got to throw it away. That's one of the things in the consumer world that kind of drives me crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just people are so used to wasting stuff, and like you said, if there's like one little imperfection, they're like, I want to return this because it has a slight scratch on here. It's like, you're gonna beat the shit out of it, as soon as you get out of the box and use it. I mean, it's a freaking tool, But I think the presentation is like a nice, added bonus to it.
Yeah, that's where we did these the cases we come with, and you also get a couple stickers when we ship you one out, and I think I sent one to you. I get some custom pencils done that have Salt City Steel on the pencil engraved in them. I hope I got one to you. The old silver pencils. That's what I always use. Been welding with silver pencils forever. Never been a soapstone fan. I'm a silver pencil or a Sharpie guy. Okay. I break soapstone like crazy. I'm not gentle, so I've never had a soapstone make it more than a couple minutes. So I always been a silver pencil guy.
I got I use a whole like mix of like writing utensils. So like depending, I'm very process specific with a lot of things that I do. So like whatever welding process I do, I use like task specific gloves for that. Whatever material I'm working with and the tolerances I have to maintain, I use like task specific writing utensils or task specific measuring utensils. So like, I'll use anything from Silver Streaks, Red Riders, Fine Point, Milwaukee pencils, the Inksols, because I found out that they just withstand so much better than a Sharpie. And I used to be a big Sharpie dork forever. But then Milwaukee Inksol came out with the ultra fine point, so I'll use those as well. Soapstone, especially if I'm doing like heavy steel and like like getting down and dirty, and I need a nice visible mark. I'll use the soapstone. But I've got the 1/4-inch soapstone, and then I've got like the 1/16, like the really ultra thin soapstone. I'll use those as well. And then what is it, Mark All Pro? I'll use that too. Yeah, they've got like the little retractable. I
haven't got those to work that well for me. I still like the old silver Markall.
Yeah, they work great for like several months, but then I think the inside of it kind of gets gummed up a little bit because it's like a real fine graphite. But I like to use those for like, if I have to like mark through a bolt hole that's kind of long, it's nice because it's got that nice needle point on there. Who is it? Pika Dry. There's a company called Pika Dry. And they make something that's like, it's got like a long needle nose point on there. I haven't pulled the trigger on one of those yet, but I think that's more for like woodworking because it's a graphite pencil. But yeah, like depending on the material that I'm working with or what I'm doing, like I've got like an old end mill case that's, probably about 10 inches tall, but it's kind of expandable. But I can fit like 30 different writing instruments in there. So like the Red Riders, the Silver Streaks, the Sharpies, the pens, pencils, everything all in one. So whatever I got going on, it's right there on my workbench. I grab it, boom, pull out the writing utensil, stick it back in there, and then I've got like a menagerie of tape measures and dial calipers and inside and outside calipers and all that stuff that I'll kind of keep there with it as well.
You sound a little more organized than I am. In my shop, I have to have pencils everywhere and Sharpies everywhere and tape measures everywhere, or they're all just gone. So I'm putting in my pocket, I'm putting in my hat, putting in my jacket. So I have to have them all over the shop. I have to have a couple. I've started getting like magnets and keeping all my pencils on magnets, my tape measures on magnets, because I'm just losing stuff like crazy.
I was waiting for Brad Frazier with Hourglass Ingenuity he came out with this like badass prototype of this magnetic tape measure holder. And I was like, dude, I want one of those, but he's not like quite happy with it. So he hasn't like launched production on them. But he's the type of guy that's like, he doesn't want to release it until it's absolutely perfect and he's 100% satisfied. But he's a really big perfectionist. So if he's not satisfied, he's not going to release it. So I think he's
CMR came out with one. Have you checked out CMR's tape measure magnet? They make the pancake hoods. Yeah. He came out with a pretty cool one that's got like a little clip that can go on your belt. So you take off the clip on your tape measure and you screw on a magnet, and then it comes with the clip that you can clip on your belt. So you just stick your tape measure right onto your belt or put it on your material. Okay. I've really only been using it on my saw. I just keep that on my saw. That one stays there. You measure, you cut, drop it back on the saw. But it's a pretty decent product. It's not too much price.
They Home Depot had one a while ago. It was something similar to that, but you would it was two parts. Like one part would clip on your belt, but it was like a heavy duty like neoprene and then it was all stitched together, but it was it had a magnetic base to it, and then the part that your tape measure would actually slip into it and lock in, but then it would join magnetically. So you clip the one part to your belt or your pocket, and then your tape measure, clip to the other part. But it always made it stick out like kind of a half inch, so it would catch on everything and fall off. But the biggest pain in the ass with having a magnet on the back of your tape measure is like, if I'm working in a shop, now I can stick it against the wall or a tool. So then when you go to look for it, you're like,
it's gone.
Yeah, like I used to look for my tape measure on tables, but now I got to look on vertical and overhead surfaces to find out where the hell I just stashed my tape measure at.
And that's why I got them everywhere. I always have like 10 tapes in my shop.
Yeah.
They're gone no matter what I do. Especially when you're measuring outside, you're working on the trailer that can't fit in the shop or whatever it is. You run outside, you left them both out there, and you come back to the saw. Where'd they go?
Yeah.
They just disappear.
So I have a bad habit of every time I go to Home Depot, or well, not every time, but like a good part of the time when I go to Home Depot, I will buy either a 5-gallon bucket or or a tape measure. Usually like
what
the
about the Milwaukee razor blades too? You got to buy one of those, the pocket knife too.
No,
they're pretty easy.
They're fucking shit. I gotta, I'll tell you about that story in a second. But like, yeah, it's usually I buy a 5-gallon bucket or, and because the 5-gallon bucket's nice because I can carry all my shit in, but then I'll also load up on tape measures, so I've got like tape measures scattered all around my office. I've got them all around the shop, my gang box at home. I've got them in the junk drawer up on my freaking where I keep my spray paint. Like I've got them strategically placed everywhere by every cutting instrument because I'm the same way. As soon as it comes off my pocket, I lose it. I make that measurement and then I walk back over to the table and it's like, oh shit, where'd my tape measure go? Oh, it's back over here by the saw. Oh, nope. I got one here on my table because they're scattered everywhere.
And I've never been good at wearing it. Some reason I've even tool belts, whatever. I've never been good at wearing stuff. So I'll just take it off and set it somewhere almost all the time. Even if I was wearing it when I started the day, I'm not wearing it by the end of the day.
So if I'm in the field, I'm really good about keeping my tape on me. And typically, like out in the field, I carry a 25-footer. But like in the shop, I lose it everywhere. As soon as I set it down, it's gone.
Yeah, in the field, you kind of always got to have one on you. You kind of look a little silly if you don't have a tape measure on you and you borrow one from your helper every time or from the homeowner or the guy who hired you to come put in this beam. Like, can I use your tape?
I've got them in the car because like I'll be on my way home from work and somebody will be like, hey, can you stop by and check out this job? Yep. Got my tape measure in my glove box.
Oh yeah.
So I keep
I definitely always have a measuring kit.
Yep.
In the car.
Tape measure, notepad, and a freaking pen everywhere I go now.
That's good. That's what you got to do because you never know when you're stopping on the way home to go measure something else.
Yeah.
Because sometimes if you tell the person I'll be there next week, they find somebody else to show up.
I've done that. Like I always try to, if somebody calls me, depending on the time of the day, it's like, okay, I can get you either after work today or like before work tomorrow or after work. I try to get with them within 24 hours because you're right. You can lose a job like that, be like, oh yeah, it's Monday. I can get to you by Thursday. I mean, they might have the job completed by Wednesday, so like get out there, get your bid in, figure out what it's going to cost, at least make face with the client. If you tell them you're going to show up to do a bid, show up to do it pull an estimate. Because if you can't show up to pull an estimate, how are they going to, expect you to show up and do the work?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of that. I've had that a bunch where that guy didn't show up. And, we're all guilty of maybe doing it every now and again where you just can't make it happen. But if you want the work, you got to show up and do it. You got to show up and be there, give them a number. And if you give them the number you want to give them, don't give them the number you think you want to give them or you think they want to hear. Make sure that you give them the number that it's worth you doing the job for.
Yeah. That's
what I've done that. We all did it when we were young. You wanted to work, so you'd give them the job. You realize you're done, and like we said earlier, you just didn't get paid. Mm-hmm. You made $10 an hour, and to work on your weekend, that's not very fun to work for $10 an hour on your weekend.
Yeah, no, you got to be charging like double time and a half on for weekend hours. I mean, that's time away from your family,
easy.
Time away from the house, time away from relaxing. You got to make it worth your while to get out there and do it. I wouldn't do it for what I make at my hourly paying job. Doesn't make sense to do it.
No, not at all.
Because they're not charging that amount for you to go out there and do the job.
No, yeah. That's what I think. A lot of these small shops they think that's what they should be charging, but they didn't realize the company they worked for, baseline was $100 an hour to send a guy out, or depending on who you were. If you were if you had a helper and that was $150 an hour, and they're raking it in. So you got to rake it in too. There's a lot of money for shops to be making right now.
Yeah, I mean, you sit back.
I don't know how it is. Is there a lot of small shops out there in Florida right now too? Because right here I could probably think of 20 different one-man shops that are just crushing it in Utah right now.
Oh, they're everywhere. And that dude that I was telling you about that I worked for doing the ornamental stuff, like he's since gotten out of teaching and started his own business back up because he realized education doesn't really pay that much. And he was like, maybe I'm not ready to retire. But he's got like a group of probably 7 or 8 different fabrication shops or, like one-man welding crews that, they'll get together and they'll bid work based on like them collectively. So like if he's got a job that he can't handle, he'll call up the other couple companies and be like, hey, you guys want to jump in on this? And they all pay each other their own rate, so depending on who gets the work, I might be a one-man band 90% of the time, but I get a job that's going to require 5 guys. Hey, I've got 5 people on speed dial that, we can all like jump in on this work and knock it out as a crew. So periodically they'll work as a crew, and they help each other out. Like one guy gets a job for a couple of them, they'll go out there and do that, and they'll just kind of share the workload when it's more than one person can handle.
Yeah, that's really good. And I've been seeing that a lot here. So, doing the Pickmaster, I have a few people reach out, and I hope more do, to be like, who can I go to? Who's good at stainless? Who's good at aluminum? Who's good at fences? Who's good at boxes? Everything's its own little skill set. And I've had that quite a bit where people are reaching out like, I need a stainless job done, like quick. Can you do it? I'm like, I'm not the best stainless, but this guy is. I can forward work along. And I think that might be a phase we move on to, is helping out, being more of a branching out to other companies and helping with something like that, to collaborate or whatever you'd call it, co-ops or something. I think there's a lot of market for something like that. And to be able to help other people is just really more what I've been enjoying more about the Pickmaster than anything, has been helping everybody out. And all over the country, if people are reaching out, they can't figure out how to measure something, or they don't know how to bid a job, they've reached out quite a bit, and I'll help them out with anything I can. I don't know everything at all. Like, there's nothing like a lot of these guys you've had on. I'm no Weldmeister like the German dude you had on the other night.
Dude, that guy's insane. Like, I learned a metric shit ton of information from that guy.
Answer any question about any process ever. But so if anybody ever needs help with any of that, just definitely find me on Instagram. Is the best place.
Okay. What, Christian, I had a great conversation with Christian the other day. And I mean, like, I've been talking to him like after the fact, we've been going back and forth talking about some of the stuff that he does. He's going to send me a sample of that Alustar TIG wire. So I'm really looking forward to like trying that stuff out, and just like, and being able to have access to him and pick his brain. And then the other dude, I think it's Jody O'Neill, Jay Twanable. I think he's out of, he's over in the UK as well.
I'm not sure I know that one.
But he's like a damn good welder. And we've been going back and forth, and he's showing me different, welding techniques and stuff that he's working on. And now he's messing with the amplitude settings after listening to the episode with Christian and I. But I just think it's really cool, like, especially the power of podcast, being able to talk to people on different continents, or, just even through Instagram, reaching out to some of these people and be like, hey, what's your experience with this? Like, how do you set your machine doing this? How do you measure this? How do you do, this type of work? And just like, kind of, once again, like a co-op, everybody's just kind of sharing that information. And like the more information you can get out, the better the industry is going to be.
Oh, for sure. The Instagram has been amazing. I've been so happy with the community that we've all formed and been part of on the Instagram with the welding. Well, I've had so many questions with even doing some of my structural welding at work. Like, some of those processes, like, I got to do this. And I've reached out like, here's what you should do. And a big one is this new CNC stuff I've been playing with. I knew nothing about this. I'm not a computer guy. I'm a welder. So to learn how to do drop on CNC to cut something out with my plasma cutter, I'll post something like, hey, reach out if you have questions, and definitely do, because drawing stuff on Fusion 360 is not easy.
No, it's not.
Sit there and do it 30 times.
And I need to get better at that stuff too. Like, I had to take a lot of technical drawing classes. Well, I didn't have to, but like, I took a technical drawing class in high school. I took one when I went to ITT Tech, like, because I got sold that bad bill of goods that, I went to a for-profit school, and I didn't know any better. I was trying to burn up my GI Bill and get a degree in the process. But no, I went there and I had to take technical drafting there as well, or technical drawing. And then when I started working on my bachelor's degree, I had to take another technical drawing. So I understand like orthographic projection, isometric, and like, how to read the Cartesian coordinates. Like, I've got all that, but like some of the stuff that they're coming out with as far as like, CAD software is like, it's so simplified. And I think what I'm doing is I'm really trying to overcomplicate it, because I had to learn on Autodesk 360, which is like a very advanced program. And like everything else is just like, it's a lot I guess it's easier to learn than I'm kind of like anticipating. And so that's why I'm kind of overcomplicating it as I'm doing it. I'm like, it can't be this easy. It's got to be a hidden setting somewhere. How do I draw a straight line? Damn you.
Oh, it definitely is. Like once I got a few played with it, it was exactly that same situation. And I never had any training in it at all. Nobody never messed with it one bit. I'd turn on a thing and I couldn't figure out how to get it to a flat plane. I didn't want to do 3D. I just want to do something.
Yeah.
I want to cut out somebody's nameplate. And finally I got a buddy here who I got my machine from. Met him on Instagram, of course, and he sold me the machine and he came over. Here's what you do. Oh, that's really quite easy, man. And then watching YouTube, going to YouTube University.
Oh, yeah.
It definitely showed me how to do it pretty simple. And like like I was saying, the Instagram community is like, this is what you do. Do this, add this dryer to your machine, buy this plasma cutter. Just make everybody's so friendly and easy to work with on here that we've all made, just makes life easy.
Yeah. What plasma cutter did you end up going with?
I just ordered that Prime, the Welder Prime. I wanted the Hypertherm, of course, but just couldn't bite the bullet for $3,000 for the 45 XP. So I went with the Prime 60. It's showing up Saturday, I think. So Saturday will be a fun day.
What kind of CNC table do you have?
Oh, I got the Langmuir.
Okay.
I ended up with the small Langmuir 20, the smallest one. It's a 24 by 24.
Okay.
And I bought it used from my buddy here. He's in Salt Lake too, an ADV Maker. He does some really great on Instagram. That's his name. And he does some really great art and stuff for all over the country. But he sold it to me for a really good deal. And he just came over and helped me fire it up. Got everything running for me. And it's a really cool, if you're looking for a table, that Langmuir is making really nice stuff right now. It's all screw drive.
Okay.
Very accurate.
I'll have to check that out. My buddy Brian Legalio, he runs that. Same thing, Langmuir. I think he just upgraded his table because he was selling a smaller one, and I think his was like 2x4. But I was like, I kind of like that'd probably be perfect for like my space requirements that I have right now. But like, if I do anything, I really want to go to a 4x4 table. Just
they
because
do a
like
3x4.
Okay,
that would be very cool.
Yeah, but you still got to rip the sheet down quite a bit. Like
you don't. No, because how they designed their table, you could put a full 4x8 sheet on there and feed it through. If you had some third hands or some sawhorses,
oh no shit, okay,
you could put a full sheet on there and start on one end of it and just keep pushing and cutting and cutting and cutting.
Okay.
So like the two sides are where the runners go, whatever, like their motor runs on one side, and I think the other one just a support, and then you can put a full sheet right in the middle of it.
Okay.
So. Yeah, that's what's cool about their table. The one thing, you have to build all their tables, which I think most of them we do. You have to assemble them, but theirs shows up in a box of parts, and you're sitting there for the afternoon playing Legos. So
once again, Legos are freaking awesome. No, I'd love to get into that because like we have a farmer's market that goes, I think it's like every Sunday, and then we've got like a food truck night that goes every Friday. So the same vendors that are out there for the farmer's market on Sundays, and like 90% of them aren't selling fruits and vegetables. So it's not like farm stuff like you think. Like it's a lot of antiquities and like homemade stuff, and I think like being able to hit that up like with the food trucks the first Friday of every month, and then being able to hit up the Sundays for a couple hours. I mean, you can make a killing doing like little artwork and odds and ends and custom signs and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, you could just kill it. And that's what, like, years ago, that's what we did. We would do it all by hand. We would sit there. My wife would come out because she had a lot smoother hand than I did, and come out there. We'd cut little things out, and we'd go sell them down the market. And we were just jealous. We'd always talk crap about the guy with the CNC because his stuff was done and looked great. Mm-hmm. But now I got one like, why didn't we do this years ago? This is, and even for making parts and putting them in a bender and bending them and making them 3-dimensional. There's so much you can do with that. I'd really recommend now that CNCs are affordable for a shop to pick one up. If you're thinking about doing one, just get one.
Yeah. I need to pull the trigger on it, but like I just bought. So my goal for, 2021 was to buy like a podcast studio. Like, cause I want to get out of my garage and get my garage space back, because like my podcasting equipment, it's everywhere. Like I don't have my garage anymore to build and fabricate and fix stuff. Like I got a small corner for that, but like half of it's devoted to my podcast. So I wanted to buy a shed, but then my air conditioner took a crap. And like in Florida, you can't live in Florida and not have an air conditioner. And so like all my money went to my air conditioning unit. Like I had to replace the entire unit. It was like 17 years old. I'm surprised it got along that far, but like got a brand new unit. So like now I've been able, and that was like back in October. So now I've finally been able to buy a shed. So I got a 120 square foot shed, and I'm getting ready to run electrical. I'm going to put drywall in there, insulation, air conditioning, soundproof, like the back half of it and everything, like set it up for a legit podcast studio. So like, I think after I get that done, my next investment, since I'll have floor space back in my garage, is to invest in a small plasma cutter or like CNC. I've already got the Storm 215C. So I've got plasma cutting capabilities, but I want to get I want to get a CNC plasma table.
Yeah, you should definitely do it. And it's so cool. And you can do it nationwide. This stuff's pretty cheap to ship. It's pretty neat, but that'll be cool to have a little shed back there. You can make it all soundproof, have people show up.
Yeah.
Do them in person's a little better, probably.
Definitely.
That'll be great.
And then the, what the hell was it? When you're cutting your stuff out, if you're using steel, so my buddy, once again, Brian Legalio, he showed me another cool trick that as soon as he showed me this, I was like, dude, that's freaking brilliant. And I started using it on everything. But like if you have to take the mill scale off, instead of like grinding it or sandblasting it, soak it in vinegar, like household vinegar. So I go to the grocery store, I buy 1 gallon of freaking vinegar, and you soak your parts in vinegar overnight, and the next day all the mill scale literally detaches from the material surface, and it'll be floating on top of that vinegar. You take the part out, you hit it with water, buff it up just a little bit, but it takes all the mill scale off and the dross. So if you
takes the draw off,
if you take the dross off it, you can just flick it right off with like a small chipping hammer or a little paint scraper or anything like that. So if you got like small parts, I've seen people on some of the different forums and stuff for CNC plasma cutting that, they're doing like big signs, like 3 foot by 2 foot, like massive signs. Well, not massive, but and so they'll buy a kiddie pool. And, they'll put a couple gallons of, regular household vinegar in there, and they drop the part in there and let it set for 24 hours, come back the next day, hit it with a wire brush, and it's like clean as a whistle, man. And it takes...
Oh, cool. I'm going to have to try that.
And it's safe for you don't have to worry about your kids falling in the swimming pool or your pets drinking it because it's vinegar, so they're not going to mess with it. But if it does get on anything, it's essentially a cleaner. So it's not going to kill anybody. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's not acid. You can buy stronger versions of the vinegar, but like household vinegar for that's like $1 a gallon. I mean, it's damn near cheaper than drinking water.
Or is it rusted pretty easy after you do that? Like if you're trying to keep it clean.
So like once you clean it up, you get the hit it with a garden hose, or just wash it off. But once you dry it, it's good. It does. Okay. But if you leave it damp or wet or moist or anything like that, it'll rust really quick. And I found that out. We had to do we did these signs for work. And I cut them out on the CNC plasma cutter at work. I took them home, ran them through vinegar overnight, washed them off with a garden hose really quick, threw them in the back of the car. By the time I got to work, because of the amount of water that was setting on them, it had already rusted. So we had to do a little bit more work with, we had to get pretty creative with some wire brushes and WD-40 to lift up that rust. But yeah, if you, just soak it in the vinegar, take it out, wire brush, or hit it with a water hose, wire brush it, and then hit it with an air hose just to dry everything off. You'll be perfectly fine.
Oh, that's a great idea. I've never heard that trick at all. You feel like you know all the tricks out here, but then all it takes is listening to a podcast and watching some Instagram posts. I didn't know anything about this.
Oh, dude, I got some old ass rusty freaking hammerheads from I went to a blacksmithing event, and I won the raffle, and it was like an old setting hammer and then like an old wedge hammer, and they're just caked with rust. And so I took one of my kids' little sand buckets for the beach, dropped the hammerheads in there, because the handle was already cut off. Just dropped the hammerheads in there, filled it with the vinegar, and then pulled it back out. The next day, wire brushed it, and I mean they look brand new, down to bare metal.
Oh, neat! I'll have to try that. And I have the opposite problem where I got to rust stuff quite a bit. A lot of my clients like rusted looks, so I'll use vinegar to help rust it, and then you leave it wet and get it hot, and it'll just do the opposite too.
I think if you mix water, bleach, and hydrogen peroxide, you can create an accelerated rust.
I've never done the bleach in it, but I've done the hydrogen peroxide.
Yeah, you throw some hydrogen peroxide, it's a little bit of bleach in there. If you Google it, you can find the exact ratio. But we pulled it up one time because I had a student that did we did a beach scene for his girlfriend's parents. They had a pool patio and everything. They were kind of going with a tiki theme. Yeah. And so parts of this thing that we cut out on CNC plasma, he wanted it to have that natural rust look. And so we use like hydrogen peroxide, bleach, and water mix. And I had to Google the formula at the time. But you literally spray it on with a spray bottle. With like 2 to 3 minutes, it's on there. Boom. And it turns out really
a lot.
cool.
Just not with the bleach. I'll have to try the bleach. I bet that helps it more because I haven't been with vinegar and water. I've never loved it. I've bought a few materials like what was the one jar Blacksmith at the local supplier here. They'd had something like that. And it's worked great. I think it was like a Blacksmith brand oxidizer.
Okay.
I always loved it, but it's pricey. You know, you're buying a 30-gallon, a gallon jug for $30.
Yeah.
It's like, that kind of sucks, but it lasts you a minute. But I've had to do a lot of rusting. I've rusted full doors that I've built, a lot of signs. People want wall art that's rusted. I've done a lot of gates even fully rusted where they wanted the full entire gate to look rusted and they didn't want powder coated. And I just did some planter boxes and they're going to get fully rusted. Like, it's a big thing out here right now is rust, which works good sometimes, but it's sometimes not easy to weld and it's not easy to cut either.
Yeah, get all your welding and cutting and everything done first and then kind of like theme it out. So do you clear coat them at all once you do the accelerated rusting process?
I just use cheap clear coat spray paint.
Okay.
I've always found that works amazing. Just sit there and spray it with the cheapest stuff you can find at Home Depot and do like 3 coats of that and it'll last them quite a while. And then you just tell them, hey, if it ever starts dripping, just spray it again.
There you go.
And they're like, oh, cool. It saves them a bunch of money. They don't have to get a powder coated clear coat over it, which doesn't really stick anyways because it's rust.
Yeah.
So I just spray them with the cheap stuff.
Sandblasted, and then you're back to square one. You're like, well, no, I got it all fixed up. I need you to make it look rusted again and then clear coat it.
My guy here at Salt Lake, he does a cool color that is a powder coated, but it looks rusty and even textured.
Okay.
And that's a really neat color that he can do. So it gets like a little bit of red, a little bit of gray, mostly just that brown color. And it turns out a really neat rust, but it's not real rust, So some people just want full multicolored rust, which I think is the way to go when you're really doing it.
Yeah, if you can heat it up too, like if you hit it with a torch and just kind of heat it up, and it'll accelerate the rusting process.
The one way I used to do it when we did the farmer's market, my old man's place had like a field behind the house, and I would just go put the sheets and just lay them in the grass. And just over the couple days out in the grass, you turn them over and they were rusty as they could be, but then you'd have to cut them rusty, which if you're plasma cutting them by hand, you can deal with it.
Well, yeah, but one of the CNC plasma cutters we have at the school, if it's got like any rust on it, it starts messing with the ohmic detection. So it's a real pain in the ass. You got to go through I'll if I know the sheet's got a little bit of rust on it, I'll just hit it with some WD-40 and I'll take like a cordless grinder with a wire brush on there and just kind of clean it up and everything, get all that shit off there just so it doesn't cause cutting issues because it'll cause it to crash when it runs over it.
Yeah, and you don't need that, but we were doing it all by hand back then, so you just dealt through it.
Oh yeah,
I've had that with oxyacetylene cutting. I don't know if you've tried to cut rusty with that, and it just won't cut either.
Like it.
You think you could? You think you can cut anything with that stuff? But...
Well, so that's because oxyacetylene itself it's a chemical reaction, so it's actually an accelerated rusting process. So you're just it's like a really controlled rust line when you're doing all that cutting and stuff. So it's just
I don't think I knew that side.
Accelerated oxidizing. So but it doesn't like rust.
Oh heck no! We did a stair replacement a few years ago, and we had to cut out all the old. They did. I'm sure. I don't know if they did it there, but they do cement to steel pan, fill them with cement. They rust out, and all over Utah. Like that's what's kept a lot of metal shops and businesses replacing these stairs they built in the '80s, and they've all rusted out. But to cut that stuff out is one of the worst jobs you could ever do. You break that cement out, and then you got to cut out those pans. You can't do it. You're sitting there with grinders because the oxy won't cut it. It's a nightmare of a job.
The best thing. So once again, that dude that I was working with, when one of the clients he turned over was like this old apartment complex out in Orlando, and they had the same thing. And I could charge, they use galvanized stairs is what I would replace it with, but it's just like almost like a channel, it looked like a channel. And then I'd weld that in and fill it back with concrete and then screed it over, flatten it out nice and neat. But I would charge $75 a stair. Just one tread to replace that.
One step.
And I got so quick at it that it literally took me probably 40 minutes to replace an entire, that's cut it out and then put the new one in, weld it out, pour the concrete, dump it in there. I could get it 40, 45 minutes and charge $75.
So what would you cut it out with then?
I would use a hammer drill.
Okay.
So
you break the steel with that too?
Yeah, you use a hammer drill because it's I think it was 14 gauge or 12 gauge galvanized sheet metal. And then because it's already rusted out underneath, I would just take that I'd put the hammer option on there and put a chisel bit, and I'd bust up the concrete, throw that in a 5-gallon bucket, because every time I go to Home Depot, I buy a 5-gallon bucket. and then I would take that chisel tip, put it on the hammer drill, and then just knock out, the 3 or 4 little stitch welds that were on there, knock that pan out. Now that the pan's out, I've got easy accessibility with a grinder. Take the grinder, knock the old welds down, throw the new stair pan in, weld it up, mix up the concrete right there on the side. I made a paddle mixer for on a heavy duty corded DeWalt drill, and I'd mix the concrete right there, dump it in there, screed it over, boom, done. Get that quick grind concrete. You can make, I'd make ridiculous. I was making money hand over fist doing that shit. But it's literally
hard work, though.
Back-breaking work. It's 110 degrees out there. My ginger ass is just sweating. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I know how it goes. Yeah, the ones where I've done lately, they screwed us, though, and they welded a piece of angle iron to the stringer and then set those pans on. So then you got to cut that angle iron that's rusted out. And so the one way I've done to fix them, and a lot of guys are doing, is we buy the pre-poured cement treads, and they have rebar in them and bolts even. And so you just weld on angle iron back to the stringer, bolt these down and walk away.
Oh, nice.
So the only welding there's no cement work. You just got to carry this 120-pound tread over there and set it down. And that's a really quick way to do those too.
Yeah, because I would imagine they're all a standard width and length.
Yep, and you can have them made whatever you want. Like you'd show up to the concrete pourer guy, and he's like, I want them to be 36 by 10 and a half or 11, or you can go bigger. You always hide that little bit behind your step. And that's a really good way to go too.
Okay.
Because we get all the snow here, and then they salt the stair.
Yep.
So then all that salt and all that water and all that ice goes under and pops that cement out.
Rust the shit out of it.
Yeah. They just get destroyed. And that's how they built them back in the 80s. All the apartment complexes were built that way. So if you like Yeti Welding, that's all he's been doing for months. It's just replacing stair treads in these apartment complexes.
You can make bank doing that, dude. I mean, that's what I did for like 2 years. I was replacing stair treads, pickets on handrails, and I would love, I love that, because I just go out there and do like a material takeoff and say, okay, how much do I need? It's all 1/2 by 1/2 solid square stock, and I'd grab my portaband and just like literally put the picket up against the the picket that I have to replace, hit it with my soapstone, and then cut it on the back of my pickup truck, throw it back in there, hit it with the flux core, done.
Oh yeah, and that flux core, it's just it can weld anything. It doesn't care. Yeah. It can be rusty, galvanized. It's just do it all. Where you can't be TIG welding that stuff.
No.
There's no possible way.
I would have gave up on that gig a long time ago if I had to go there and TIG weld freaking galvanized stair pans in. That shit sucks.
But when I worked for the weld shop, what was hard was we'd go into these $1 million homes in Park City, Utah, and we'd have to flux core inside of these homes, and we'd be the last guys in there. The carpet be down, would it be like $40 a square foot carpet made out of wool, and they'd be like, hey, go weld that up. What? So we'd have blankets down, covered in water, welding blankets, cardboard. It'd just be such a pain in the butt to make a 2-inch weld instead of buying like a cheap TIG welder to just hurry and buzz it together, which they didn't really have these nice TIG welders that you could take with you, inverter machines back then either. So wasn't what it is now, where these guys are going in like, you're cheating, guys. Come on.
That's why I love freaking multi-process inverters, dude, because like I could go out and like I built my entire business off of the guy, once again, the guy that this freaking episode's all about this dude. So Bill Warren's the guy's name, and he's a freaking awesome guy. He taught me a lot of cool shit. But I traded a job for him for a machine. I was like, hey, I'll put in, if you buy me this machine, I will give you X amount of hours in labor. And so he bought me a 210 from Lincoln, 210 multi-process machine with a spool gun adapter. And I think he bought me the TIG version. It was like right when it first came out, like way back in 2015, like October 2015. So now I had TIG capabilities, I had flux core, and I had spool gun. So I could go off and do all these jobs running off a generator. But like I'm fixing aluminum out there with a spool gun, I'm doing flux core on the stairs, and then going inside and doing like gates and handrails and stuff using the TIG. So, I mean, it's just buying a multi-process machine that weighs like 30, 40 pounds. You can make ridiculous money off of it. And, they'll run off it. I ran that machine off a generator for freaking 2-3 years. I still run it off a generator. And people are like, oh, you can't run it off a generator because it's got to be clean power. And it's like, the amount of money that I'm making on this thing, if it takes a shit on me, I'll just buy a new welding machine.
Oh, yeah. And carrying them is the biggest thing. That's what I finally broke down about the Miller 215 multi, because my dad had Miller 350, I think it was, old transfer machine for like 20 years. That's the first machine I bought. Carrying that thing around sucked. It's like a 62 pounder with a spool in it. You have to carry that through some house stairs, down the hallway. It just killed you to move those things. Now they're nothing. They're light as shit.
Yeah, like you can literally throw a rope on it. Like I've tied ropes to my welding machine and had it hanging off of an extension ladder with me. And then you just tie the power cord together and everything so it doesn't come undone because, gravity. But yeah, I'm up there welding like balconies and all this stuff, because like you get like a little 6-foot whip, for your MIG gun. So you got to get the welding machine up there. But yeah, I'd tote it up a ladder with me, carry it like a damn lunchbox.
Oh yeah, that's at work. On the ski lifts, we finally switched over to a wire feed run off the generator to run the flux core. And oh man, it's so much easier.
Yeah, it's a lifesaver.
They're just so figured out, and you can see your amperage right on it. You know exactly where you're at. We don't have it set up for adjustment yet with the remote adjustment, but you just yell at the helper to go turn it up or down and just run it. I can weld stick pretty well, but when you're doing short runs, it just sucks.
Yeah.
And you're going around stuff. When you're especially fixing those chair cracks, like I was saying, they're only like a 4-inch weld, and half the time it's around a 1-inch pipe even. And that's not very much fun with a stick welder. Yeah. I'll tell you, it sucks. So finally switching over to the flux core and running this Rockmount wire, it's hard to screw it up.
I love flux core, and like I know a lot of people are hesitant and they don't want to switch to it and everything, but it's like it just makes so much sense because every time I pull that trigger, the arc's going to start. I don't have to sit there and fight it and, like peck my rod at it and get it going and worry about developing porosity at the start. Like I pull the trigger and it starts welding and it burns deep and it burns hot and it's quick.
Oh yeah. It burns really deep. That's where if somebody's interested in it, reach out to me. I could give you some tips on how to run that stuff. Cause I've been running for a long time, sit there and run spools and spools all summer long too. And it's a good welding I know I've pushed it a bit, but the Rockmount, the Polaris, it's stronger than the 7018. I think it's an 83 tensile strength or something, and it's more elongated, so it'll stretch even better if you're allowed to use it. But if your specs aren't letting you do it, you can't do it. But yeah, I love running that stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to look it up because I got the book right here with me. So yeah, 95,000 pounds of tensile strength, and 30. So the Polaris is 33% elongation.
Yeah, that's huge. Like a 7018 doesn't stretch at all. So.
No, I think 7018 we've all seen around like 20% elongation or something like. So when it stretches, it's not stretching that far. But the Polaris A, it's 95,000 pounds of tensile strength plus. So you get a stronger weld that's also a little bit more ductile, a little bit more forgiving. So it's great for structural applications when especially when you got people hanging from it. Oh yeah, and that's where we've really moved over to it. They showed up and did a little demo for us and. I've been super happy with all their stuff for doing this maintenance welding. Like if you're anything dirty, like you said, you covered that thing in paint, covered it in grease, it'll just burn it. And then they have what's their other wire and rod for like your unknown metals. That one's really cool too. Brutus. Yeah. It's not cheap though. Like if you don't need it, don't run it. Right.
It is some high dollar stuff. I tried getting it. They're like, no, we're not buying any of that.
But the amount of money that you're going to save by switching over and using that stuff, if you need it, it's going to outweigh it. It's like, why do you, I say it all the time in the intro. It's like, why keep putting a Band-Aid on something when what you really need is surgery? Like 7018 and 70S6, they're only going to get you so far. And they're only, they're meant for like the ideal work environments. But if you're out there in the field, you got galvanized, you got similar materials, switch over and like use the right, like I said before, I'm very task specific in a lot of the stuff that I do. So like, that's what I would use. That's a rod that's built for this application. Let me use that instead of forcing the same 7018 and 70S6 that, they built it for originally in a nice clean shop environment with brand new steel before it went to the galvanizers,
Oh yeah, it's so much easier. And I don't really get to weld new stuff at work hardly at all. It's always fixing stuff. And if it is, it's a bunch of old shit. And sometimes it's got to be the preheat just right, the post heat just right. And I'm seeing it where we'll get a crack it again. And guess gonna go do that again. You switched up Polaris. Nope, don't have to do it again.
Nice.
It's pretty good stuff.
Well, awesome. Weston, it's been an awesome time having you on the podcast, talking about, like your work experience, the product and everything. Where can people reach out to you? Where can they find the Picket Master?
So I got my website. We can buy the Picket Master on my website at saltcitystill.org. I got it all there. And then my Instagram is SLC Salt City Still. And of course I'm on TikTok now. It's Salt City Still, which I've been posting a lot of ski lift stuff on there. If you want to check out a little bit how ski lifts work, done some videos on there that are pretty fun.
Okay.
And then Facebook, I try to stay away from that, but everything goes there. But I don't like Facebook that much. So.
It's no friggin' wasteland anymore.
It's a little negative. I can't handle it anymore. So yeah, my Instagrams, if you want to reach out to me with any questions, hit me up there or email me at saltcitystill.org or Gmail, saltcitystill@gmail.com, and I could definitely love to help anybody out that's looking for a picking master and have any more questions about it. Okay. We got a bunch of how-to videos all over all that stuff and how it works and to help out some shops.
Nice. One thing I do recommend is because you put it out there on your Instagram feed the other day is that Shiner's Practical Math Dictionary.
Oh, dude, yes. If your guys don't have that book,
I've got it in my cart. I
it.
need to pull the trigger and just buy the damn thing. But like
dude,
Math for Welders
it is so cool.
Huge.
I don't know a lot of their history. It tells you on the book, but they are badass. They have a workbook too, so you can kind of study along with it. And then like you fill out the workbook. I'd maybe recommend doing it with like a pencil you can erase, just so you can do it again. Mm-hmm. Just sit there if you have some free time. Go through their workbook. Go through the Shiners. It is super cool.
Yeah, I think it was like $12 on Amazon. It was relatively cheap.
Yeah, they're cheap, and it's going to teach you if you like you're stuck in math, like you can't figure out how do I divide that fraction. Like I know how to do all this other stuff. You go to that page, it'll show you how to do it, nice. And it'll show you how to do it as a tradesman. Like that's the cool part. It'll even show you how to like. There's a whole section on how to use a plumb bob, how to use your 3-4-5 is a square. It's all this really good information. Like if a guy does, if you're doing any math at work at all. Oh, you need to get that Shiner's Dictionary. I don't know where I even found it. Might have found a podcast or somebody's post, and I love it. I've been pushing them pretty hard. I want to reach out to them and see if they'd give me some to send out because they're really cool.
Yeah. It's funny you brought up the 3-4-5 triangle because my daughter, she's in 3rd grade, and I was helping her with her math homework the other night, and she had to like measure out this triangle, and it actually worked out to it was 3-4-5, and so I kind of like gave her a little lesson, and she's looking at me like, the hell are you talking about, old man? Like, I don't understand. Like, okay, I get it. I got the answer. I'm on to the next question. I'm like, no, but you don't understand. You can actually compound these measurements and make a perfect 90-degree angle with a 45. And she's like, oh, yeah, okay, Dad.
It's magic.
Yeah, it's
kind of like that other trick when you go on your tape measure to find center and you go to your odd numbers and find that even one in the middle and you're good to go.
Yeah.
But on 3-4-5, if a guy doesn't know what that is, look that up. It's going to save you a bunch of time.
Oh, yeah. You figure out if it's square with a tape measure.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. It's great to talk to you.
Oh, no problem, man. I appreciate your time. It's an honor having you on the podcast and everything. I really appreciate, what you're doing, the products you're pushing, and, the example you're setting for people, and then the information that you're putting out on your Instagram channel. And then TikTok as well, like showing people little helpful little hacks, how to get better and increase speed and productivity in what they're doing.
I'm trying with that. Some of those times, like I should probably show this, but I'm sure you feel like everybody knows it. There's a lot of stuff you just weren't shown, and it's a lot of this stuff. If you kind of weren't shown, you're not going to figure it out.
Exactly.
Unless you're smarter than me.
Yeah, there's
which a lot of people are.
Follow, I think his name's Carpentry Bymar on Instagram.
Yeah.
That dude,
I think I know that one.
He's got like all kinds of cool.
Well, that's all he does is tips, right?
Yeah,
that's all
he does is like
killer
little
carpenter
20,
tricks.
30 second carpenter tricks. But like a lot of that stuff transfers into steel because we build stairs, we build handrails and stringers and, or stairs, handrails and stringers and like all that stuff. And how he finds different measurements and angles and cut a perfect circle, with he's just got some really brilliant shit that actually transfers into metalworking. So I would check him out.
It's all the same stuff. That's what, if any of us are fighting that your trade's better. No, you're not. Trade's not better. It's all the same shit. You just glue it together different.
You're just trading it. You're just swapping out the medium, whether it's 2x4 or, angle or steel or, pine. It doesn't matter.
Yep. Oh, it's all the same.
Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is all I have for you this week. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Just a Tip Tuesday, where I discuss the hot start and dig function for shielded metal arc welding. And then on Wednesday, I'll have an all-new episode of Weld Wednesdays with AWS, where I talk to Daryl Peterson about welding qualification versus certification. Stay safe out there, and until next time, make every weld better than your last.